Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Erin Moran. Erin, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So Erin Moran, originally from New York with a bachelor's degree in business marketing, moved to Florida in 2011 to study for her master's in clinical mental health counseling. She's a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and gained clinical experience working at a university counseling center, a residential addiction treatment facility, and an outpatient eating disorder. In 2021, she connected with Rick Padlow to develop the clinical program at Sophros Recovery. Erin is a certified group practitioner, and she's taken several intensive trauma trainings, which has fueled her passion for helping clients at Sophros to heal and transform their lives. Erin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Yeah. So I say originally I'm a New Yorker. I feel like that's also my heart. I have a tattoo over here, and I have an apple to represent New York.
You do?
And then I have an
Wow.
orange to represent Florida. So I feel like those are both of my hearts. So I grew up, spent about 20 years in New York, followed my sister down to Florida. She had gone to UF, decided to stay in Florida. I came down here with her, and she's also a therapist. So we say, must have been a really smooth childhood to have both of us become therapists.
Right. Interesting.
So I've been in Jacksonville, Florida now for over a decade.
Wow. Okay. So, well, let's talk about that. How did all this start for you?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So my journey, clearly said, my background, I was a business marketing. So I was not interested in becoming a therapist. I had people telling me in my early 20s, you'll be a great therapist. And my response then was why would I ever want to do that? I have to tell people that life has a sense of humor. And, here I am. It took me a while to get to this path. I really struggled in my early 20s figuring out what did I want to do, what really fit, what did my career and future look like. And after many people planting that seed, I finally decided to kind of follow my sister's footsteps. So she graduated about 2 years before I did in this program, and became fascinated hearing her and her friends talk about therapy and just talk about what they're learning. And so I decided to take that leap, and very quickly was I get it. I get what everyone was saying, that this is
why were they let me
fit.
stop you there. Why were a lot of people saying that to you? You'd be a great therapist.
Yeah. Great question. I think since I was very young, I had probably a passion and an interest in seeing potential in people, sometimes to a fault. I definitely, my recovery journey is making sure that I'm recovering people pleasing and codependent tendencies. And we might get into that some today. But I really always wanted to hold space for people. I was the person coming up with advice for people. I was a cheerleader for people. I was coming up with different perspectives, really since a very young age. And so people would be wow, you really see me, or you really give really good advice. And so that was the thing that was prompting people to be I feel like you do a really good job at this. But that seemed like such a daunting, heavy, hard space to hold without really knowing what was in this field. And it is. I mean, it could be heavy and hard to hold, but also such a privilege to hold.
That's so interesting. I often hear that from people. I mean, people would say that to me, and I don't know if it's true for you, but when I would hear that, you think you don't value it that much because it's who you are. It just like comes so easily. It's just your thing. But that's so cool that people said that. So, okay, you decided to go forth. So what did you do? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I went to University in North Florida. Their clinical mental health counseling program was a great program. I had a wonderful experience. I had really good professors. Some of my best friends I still have from my cohort. So now a decade later, we call ourselves the like the Fantastic Four. There's four of us. So yeah, I jumped in, went to the program, and very quickly it was like, this is 100% exactly where I meant to be.
Wow.
It felt like you said, it was like a skin just sort of stepping and falling into place, being like, this is exactly what I'm meant to be doing. I thrive off of this. I love holding space for other people. I love being able to maybe see things that other people aren't, helping to point those patterns out together, helping us to challenge some of those negative spirals that, even relating. Like, I'm a very transparent therapist. Like, I love being like, I'm going to bring me into the room appropriately,
Right.
and
Of
with
course.
healthy boundaries. But I'm like, hey, I'm going to model that, like, being a human is messy and hard, and that's okay. And there are ways to do it that are healthier and that you don't have to be as alone. So yeah, it's been a wonderful, amazing journey. And I'm so glad people did plant that seed. Otherwise, I might have waited even longer to join into this field.
So where does the recovery part come in? You touched upon it a little bit.
Yeah. So I have a lot of addiction in my dad's side of the family. So that's something that I grew up being familiar with. Um, didn't think, again, like I say, life does have a sense of humor. The other thing I also said when very early in my career was like, I don't ever want to work with eating disorders or addiction. Okay. Okay. Um, and because I really struggled early on in my career, or in my life, figuring out what I wanted to do with my career, I really felt like I wanted to work with college students. That sort of, I'm not a kid anymore, but yet what is this adulting thing? And, who am I? And I loved that. And that's where I started my first 4 or 5 years of my career. Was an amazing experience, had amazing colleagues, amazing mentors. And then I was sort of like, well, what else? I kind of got into some of my trauma, my passion for trauma, got exposure to group therapy, started supervising new therapists at that point. And I was like, what else? And I just happened to apply to a job at a residential addiction facility and fell in love, took that leap and was like, wow, it was a whole new world. I mean, people who are struggling with addiction say like it's a symptom of mental health. It's a symptom of trauma. It's a symptom of anxiety, depression, so many wounds that have existed in our life. And so many people don't have any tools or resources. So being able to really just shine some light on some of this was so cool to see this transformation and this
Mm-hmm.
healing sometimes in a really short period of time of people being so hungry for connection as well as hungry for, oh, there's another way, or, oh, that was a trauma that I experienced. It maybe wasn't PTSD, but it was a trauma. And just sometimes having that light click could be completely transformative for somebody. So
Yeah, and a lot of times, and correct me if I'm off the mark here, but a lot of times people with addiction don't. It's the addiction becomes the giant thing that almost obscures the trauma, right? It's like, what do you mean? I didn't have trauma. I wasn't in combat. I wasn't hit by a truck.
mhm,
So
mhm.
when you first got into this program, now are we talking about at Sophros here? Was that we didn't get there yet?
Initially, no,
Okay, so we're not
not
there
there
yet.
yet.
Okay, so when you
Yep.
first started, when you in this program with addiction, you said you were just like this was incredible. Talk more about what fit for you, what sparked you in that.
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. I think that was when I really started to solidify my passion for really doing trauma work and recognizing the need. Um, and really, my style of like, and when I work with trauma is undoing the aloneness, is
Mhm.
allowing someone to be like, I am here, and allowing my clients to like feel seen and cared for, and allowing them to then see and care for not care for me, but like see that like my care is genuine. Um, and so I would say that really sparked a difference. I think a lot of clients have had bad experiences at treatment facilities. The amount of clients who have been like, I've gone to treatment X amount of times and have felt sometimes that some staff are just there for a job, are burnt out or are over it or just checking a box. And that is a whole new trauma in and of itself. If you're coming
Mhm.
into this really vulnerable state saying, probably I want to heal and I want to change and I want to learn something new, but this addiction, this substance has its claws in me, to then feel like people are annoyed by you, um, or that you're just a burden. It's like, wow, we're now adding on a whole nother layer. Um, and so that part of being like, these people matter, and seeing that if somebody is, sometimes I say like, we all tantrum, we'll have these younger versions of ourselves that are like, I don't like this. And if I could just hold some space for that and validate that, like, okay, there's a part of you, whether it's this angry part, this sad part, this scared part, that's having a really strong reaction, and that's valid. And at the same time, I wonder if there's another way that we could get this need met, a way in which I could be your teammate, a way in which you don't have to be alone and don't have to engage in maybe the same self destructive behavior. And then as clients saw that, like, oh, she's not going to be intimidated by my anger. She's
Mhm.
not, I don't have to worry about getting rejected by her. That I could show up in these same ways that people would have said, oh, you're too much. And knowing that like this person's willing to sit and hold space with me and saying like, okay, cool. I get that you're angry. Can we now talk about it? And that was like amazing. Like I had some clients that people, unfortunately, at the facility I previously worked at were labeling them of like, oh yeah, she's a tough one.
Mhm.
And I got to
And that
see a
happens all the
completely
time.
different person all the time,
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah. So that was the part that was like, that was so rewarding to be like, oh, I know they can come in my office and be seen, all parts of them. And then that gives them permission to start to show up as a different version of themselves. So
Where
that was
does
that was
this
the part that was so good.
where does all this, I mean, you sound amazing. Where does this come from? Did you start out like this?
I think if you probably were to ask my family, probably came out of the womb in some ways. So I think from my own trauma, that's the reality of it. It's like I love my family and I'm very grateful that I have several family members who have really done the work as well. We've had to have some really hard conversations. But the reality is, I grew up with a lot of conflict in my house. And so I was sort of thrust into this therapist role from a very young age. That's why I
Mhm.
say that people pleasing codependent, I 100% took on the label of like being the good daughter, whatever that may mean. Really lost my connection with myself, which makes sense. My struggles in my 20s, like how would I figure out my career when I didn't even know how to really connect with what was my truth? Being willing to let people be angry and upset with me. So yeah, from a very young age, I was playing a therapist for my parents, trying to de-escalate conflicts, trying to help them to slow down and make sure that they're talking to each other and not storming and slamming doors and name
Mhm.
calling and all of that. So, really just growing up in a highly emotionally reactive household with a lens and a mask of thinking it was a super loving household, and then also
Right.
realizing like, oh, but maybe A and B aren't adding up. So I say it's like in some ways that's the resiliency that can come from trauma. Is there was a lot of hurts, a lot of things that I had to shed, in my life, and a lot of therapy that I had to go to be like, this isn't serving me. Being a people pleaser, being codependent, telling people what I think they want to hear just to avoid rejection and avoid conflict is causing them pain, me pain. I don't even know who I am. And so I had to work on those things. But then the other part of it is I give me an angry client, give me a client who wants to scream, and I'm like, sign me up. Like I can de-escalate like nobody's business. I'm like, I got this. So I'm like, I could take these things that were these beautiful traits that really helped me to become an amazing therapist and to be patient and to see all perspectives. Like that's probably why I am so good at the addiction world, is I could see all of the parts and all of the
Mm,
parts play their roles. And yet I have to work on, and this is the benefit of becoming also a therapist, is I had to work on, oh, anger is okay. And conflict is
mm.
so beautiful because it gives us the opportunity for repair. So it's been a
Awesome.
cool life journey.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. So now, forgive my naivete here, but um, there seems to be an understanding, like a cultural understanding, that uh, recovery is a long process, right? It's almost understood, like you're going to go into recovery multiple times. Is it that seems to be understood? Is there truth to that? Is that just the way it is?
I think absolutely. Um, and I think, this is where it's not just substances. I view recovery as recovery from maladaptive, unhealthy, harmful behaviors and ways of thinking. And that is undoing like a huge
Mm,
foundation and framework. For most of us, it's childhood or it's our early relationships. It's the way that we view life, the way that we view relationships, the way that we
right.
view relationships with authority figures, with men, with women. And we develop these ways of coping. And so for a lot of people, I think all of us numb out in some ways, whether it's I'm taking a nap, I'm going to, spend hours on TikTok, I'm going to go shopping, I'm going to, have an unhealthy relationship with food and either eat, too much or too little, or I'm going to, engage in a substance to try and, I mean, it's so common of people being like, talking about wine moms. I've had a stressful day. I'm going to have my wine after work,
Right. Right. All right.
So it is a
Let,
lifelong journey.
I love that point. Yeah. Let's talk about Sophros. So
Yeah.
Sophros recovery, how did that come about?
Yeah. So our CEO is in recovery himself. He is a very smart and talented individual, and I feel very lucky to have had us just kind of stumble into each other's lives. A person I previously worked at the residential facility had reached out to me years later. I was no longer at the residential facility and thought I was like, I need a break from treatment centers. I had, unfortunately, a lot of not the best experiences with leaders throughout my career, and was like, I'm going to just do my private practice. I'm going to do this thing on my
Mm-hmm.
own. Um, and this guy reached out and said, hey, there's an IOP PHP opening in Jacksonville, Florida. And this guy's looking for a clinical director and someone to develop the program. And, I'm not really in it, but I'll get you guys in contact. And got in contact with Nick, and stars aligned. So him being in his recovery journey, he really felt passionate about this level of care. There's a lot of residentials, and there's a lot of really good residential facilities. There was not an abundance of this sort of aftercare. And there's a lot of outpatient therapists, not enough, but
Mm-hmm.
they do exist. And so this in between level, which I love, I think it's like the cream of the creme, or however that saying goes, it is like perfect for me because it's intensive. You get to work in a team. The clients get really immersed in this healing, but yet they're not away from life. They're still having to deal with triggers. They're still having to go to the grocery store and drive
Mm-hmm.
past the liquor store and still exist, still have to plan for dinner and deal with traffic, but they get really intense support. So that's why I love it. But yeah, we just kind of came into each other's lives and our values really aligned. He really, really cares about the clients. Like client-centered passion is, you would think he's a therapist. He's not. He's a West Point grad, Stanford MBA. Like he's definitely like more of a
So
business
he
guy, but
created Sophros in and of itself.
he
The whole
created the business,
the
and
business.
then
Okay.
I created the clinical.
Okay.
So like I developed the group program. I,
Wow.
created the therapy component. I don't know how I did it, but I did it.
Now, just to be clear, so this is not a residential facility.
It is not.
Okay.
Mhm.
So anyone can go there, or is it most opportune or most optimized for people who've already done residential and then they come to you guys?
So we do both. We
Okay.
have some people who have done residential and then they step down. So it's like the step down aftercare. But we have some people who maybe don't meet criteria for residential. It's not necessarily that severe, or some people who are just flat out refusing. And then they also go. So, like, I view addiction on such a spectrum. And so
Hmm.
it's that part of it being like some people maybe aren't to that super severe, like they could stop on their own, but we don't want to just white knuckle it. We don't want to just be like, okay, I'm not using a substance, but I've not developed any new tools. So that's where we come in to really not only how to stay sober tools, but how to human healthier, how to exist in this world in a more balanced way. And that's where we come in and really provide those tools, provide that support, provide this safe, supportive, loving environment. So yeah, as anyone, I say it's sort of like a part-time slash full-time job, and that's the people who, come and really invest and immerse themselves into this program, because you're getting groups, you're getting individual, we have medical providers, like you're just getting
Wow.
kind of
Sounds amazing.
a warm hug. Yeah. Oh, it
Sounds
is.
amazing.
It is.
Now, when you said, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take on this job, what are some of the elements, qualities, um, things that you wanted to bring to this program that maybe you felt weren't around or were lacking?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, I wanted to hire well. And I wanted to ensure my team also felt safe, supported, respected. Um, I don't necessarily think treatment is fully reinventing the game. There's bits and pieces
Mm-hmm.
with it. Like, so we do offer yoga, we have nutrition, health, and wellness. So, like, we try to, and then we also have the medication component. So, like, we try to address like the full person. So, yes, that's not like mind altering brand new information. Um, we are doing like some basic therapy, the CBT skills, the DBT skills. We're doing an understanding trauma, introducing people to what trauma is, communication skills, emotion regulation skills, like all of that stuff. But I think first and foremost, it is if I can hire well, but I can retain my team and I can
Mm-hmm.
create a space. I say like a therapist, we're the container for sort of all of the stuff. We help our clients to hold it. I want to make sure that I give the container everything it needs to be successful. And so I want my team to feel that they have resources, that they have support, they can come to me, that anything can exist. Like they can come as their messy, imperfect versions of themselves and know that like that's okay. Let's talk about it and figure out how I
Mm-hmm.
can best support you. That's what's different. I can hire well and I can keep really good therapists who are so passionate about this work. My team cares. I mean, we have a channel, a communication channel that's a celebration channel, and they are like constantly celebrating each other of like, oh yeah, and they teamwork, they're jumping in for each other. And it's just amazing. I think that's why we're changing the game. You come in the door and you feel,
Right.
oh, people want to be here and they care. They're not just saying things that sound nice. They
Right.
buy it.
That's
That's
amazing. I mean,
that's the difference.
that's crucial. I mean, that your ability to provide that space where those therapists can feel like they can show themselves without fear of, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, or I'm not going to be viewed, I'm going to be viewed as less than or not a good therapist. That's crucial. And that space that allows them to do that just fuels their energy and creativity, which of course then trickles down with the clients.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
So
It is.
Sophros is, where is it?
In Jacksonville, Florida. So Northeast
Jacksonville.
Florida.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now people now, is everything you guys offer, is it in that space? Are you doing any online stuff or what?
So, quick question. So, we're open in Jacksonville, Florida. We are opening hopefully in the next 2 weeks in Tampa. So, Temple Terrace near Busch Gardens, USF, that area. We'll be doing the same thing, a PHP IOP. We already have an amazing team hired there. Love them. So grateful for the team that we got there as well. And then in the next few months, once Tampa's up and running, we're going to launch a virtual program, which will be really for clients who are in the middle of a state, clients who are like the nearest treatment is 2 hours away. Even an hour plus is a long way if you're driving somewhere 3 days a week. So we really want to be able to offer to people who don't have access to that, a program that's still top tier, super awesome. So we're still in the process of launching like what that looks like to kind of tweak it to make sure that those clients still get the same exact type of experience. And then still that feel of like, these people are in my corner and really care, even if they're through a screen.
That's awesome. Now, as we kind of wind down here, I want to ask you a question, just so that everyone doesn't think you're a superwoman. I want you to share. I want you to share like an early clinical experience where you're like, "Holy crap, I can't do this. This sucks." What am I doing?
Many of those. I'm good. And so now I'm going to supervise many of my people on my team. And I say all the time, like, that's such a normal and I think a healthy experience as a therapist to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I still have experiences where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, that's good because if I use that, as long as I don't spiral in a like feeling small and insecure, but if I use that to be like, well, let me take a check-in with myself. Like, am I tired or burnt out? Am I needing to do some more professional development? Is there something I would want to do differently in that situation? And sometimes the answer to those things is yes. And so it does fuel me. Other times it's just simply saying like, no, I would do it exactly the same. It's just the way that things aligned. But man, early in my career, I talking about this journey of growth and healing, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do this. I once co-facilitated a group and I stayed silent it was an hour and a half group and I didn't say a word. And I was a facilitator of this group. I didn't ask a question. I had a lot of thoughts in my head, but I just censored everything. And my co-facilitator at the end was like, what happened?
Right.
And I was like, I was so anxious and I don't know. And like, I just allowed my fears and my censoring of myself to exist, which it still does exist, but it was in the forefront. Mm-hmm. And that was such a valuable lesson for me because as I was telling her, like, well, I thought about this at this moment, or I would have said this. She was like, those were brilliant. That was perfect.
Right.
And so it really kind of was like, I learned that I just have to sometimes take a risk. And I also learned, which I now teach my team, that there's not much that we could do wrong. We can, sometimes maybe make mistakes, but sometimes mistakes are beautiful because they give us an opportunity for that repair. It gives us an opportunity to even deepen and strengthen the connection. So that was a really valuable and awkward and uncomfortable learning experience, but one that I still reflect on because I'm like, wow, I started out feeling so small and that I could be wrong and I could do harm. And I, was like, let me just let me keep myself wrapped up so tight. And I recognized that like that was serving no one and no one would benefit from me blooming. And so I really learned to try and take those risks, and it's scary and it's hard. It's still scary. I mean, doing these podcasts, like I still had a little bit like my heart racing ahead of time, but it was like, okay, like I could do the risks and the scary things because usually it's worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're amazing. I love talking to you, man. Love to have you back at a later time. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so
I would love to be back.
I know a lot of people listening to this going, oh my God. Yes, and that's what a lot of people need and can benefit from. All right. So what's the best way for people to reach out and contact you, Erin?
Yes. So you could go to sophrosrecovery.com, and that's SOPHROS, sophrosrecovery.com. If people want to reach me personally, my email's super easy. It's Erin, Erin, at softroastrecovery.com. Be happy to, answer any questions. But if you want to check us out, and then the Tampa one is soufroastrecoverytampa.com. So if you want to check out kind of what we do, take a peek at our team and see some of these amazing therapists, the things that I feel the most proud of is my team. Definitely check us out.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, really appreciate you being here and taking the time. And you just have this really beautiful way of articulating what I feel is really beautiful about the work you do. Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been wonderful.
All right. Take care.